Welcome to Transformational Leadership, the podcast for leaders building high-performance organizations and teams. In every episode, you will hear from executives and transformation experts who've led with vision, executed under pressure, and delivered real, scalable, and impactful results. You'll hear practical insights and leadership stories from executives who've driven change, delivering transformation, and consistently winning in highly complex environments. No fluff. Just frameworks, lessons, and stories from the front lines of leadership. If you're serious about building competitive impact through people, you're in the right place. Here is your host, Jeff Harnois.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Transformational Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Harnois. My guest today is Mandy Monk, founder and chief people officer of the People Advisors, an HR consulting firm specializing in talent strategy, serving healthcare, hospitality, and manufacturing companies with hourly workers. Mandy is a thought leader and advisor for 3 separate talent technology companies, and we'll hear a little bit about that today. She's also the winner of multiple learning and development awards, including multiple awards from Brandon Hall. Today, we're going to be talking about talent and AI, which I know is a topic many of you are interested in. We're going to talk about something that she calls Drive-Thru AI, how to leverage existing talent and the displacement of talent via AI, which again, I think is one of those subjects that many, many people are interested in wrestling with today. With all of that, Mandy, welcome to the stage. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be a part of your series and looking forward to connecting with everyone.
Awesome. And I think you've got some really, really rich content for us today. So I'm looking forward to getting into that. You talked a little bit about, or in a previous conversation with you, you talked about the idea of drive-through AI. I'm really interested in what that means.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, a lot of the companies I work with are in the hospitality space. And so this one happens to be a restaurant that I worked with where they were implementing AI through the drive-through. So very interesting concept. They were really trying to increase their guest satisfaction by having more time for their people at the drive-through to connect with their customers and their guests. So they wanted that human interaction. So we're planning to use AI to really capture the order information, giving that person more time to connect with them at the window, make sure they got the order right, surprise and delight, for lack of a better term, at the window perspective.
Yeah,
It was a great concept, great thought process. The CEO was super excited that they were going to be giving back to the employees and finding a way to make the experience better for them as well as for their guests. The financial team was excited because it was going to save money from a labor perspective, but was going to really, truly, what they were mostly focused on was that it was going to increase speed at the window and was going to increase accuracy, which would drive guest satisfaction, which was a huge component.
Mm-hmm.
Labor is labor. I mean, there certainly are many components to drive that, but ultimately their end result was really about the guest experience, and really the speed that they would do at the window. As you know, when we go through drive-thrus, we're all about speed and how fast can we get through there. But they still wanted to slow it down a little bit once it got to the window, and have the conversations.
Well, I think that the concept for me, this idea of, automating the parts that are automatable, but the twist in this for me, the thing that's really interesting to me is they're automating the parts that are automatable, which includes a motivation for efficiency, I'm sure.
Exactly.
But the motivation here of sort of maximizing the customer contact with real humans is a really, really interesting perspective, because I don't necessarily hear that when I hear people talking about AI or automation in general.
Exactly. Yeah. So the hope is, and if I think about hospitality in general, and you kind of clued into this, is a lot of the conversations I have is not could you do that, but should you? do that, right?
Mm,
So should you use AI for that or not, right? But in
mhm,
this space, really, at the end of the day, there are 50 hamburger joints on every corner, right? There's tons of
mhm,
pizza places. What is the true differentiating factor? And that's the experience that you drive. That's the
mhm,
one piece you get to control the most is the experience and the moments that you are creating for your guests. And that window is just as important of an experience or a moment of truth as any other part of the experience. And so
mhm.
for this particular restaurant brand, they were really focusing on that. Now, when I came into it, they were having a problem. So they had implemented. I was not part of that implementation. I was part of the what's going wrong, and it values some pieces and processes. And so,
Clean.
as we know, most AI projects fail the first time out, right? In fact, I actually saw a recent study with the University of Texas at Dallas that said 95% of AI projects fail,
Wow. I don't
which
think I
is
knew that it was
crazy.
that high.
It is, yes. Well, a lot of it goes to outcomes. Like, what's the outcome you were driving, right? And so in this case, it was exactly that. We knew what they wanted, but what happened wasn't the outcome that they were expecting. So with
Mhm,
anything with AI is only as good as what you tell it or train it to do.
mhm,
Right. So I'm going to
mhm,
reemphasize that because that is the piece that most people miss. AI is only as good as what you tell it or train it to do. So they
mhm.
implemented the AI. They removed the headcount at the first window and taking the order, ensured they had a skilled, talented person at the drive-through to be able to deliver the order, take the money, take the payment, whatever that may be. But then they found when I went into these restaurants at the request of the CEO, they were turning it off. And she was like, I don't understand it. We did this for them. We also did it for the guest experience and to make their job and their life easier. And why are they turning it off? I don't understand why this isn't working.
Mhm,
So obviously, labor was not in a good place. Speed was not in a good place. So many things were not in the right place. And
mhm.
after evaluating and sitting through some of these restaurants, what I learned is that they didn't train the AI first. So if
Oh,
uh, yeah, so if they turned it on, they said go, they did it. They took out the labor. There was no ramp up, no change management, no components to that.
mm,
And what they found is that when a guest comes through the window, and in restaurant speak, we say 86 the tomatoes or onions, right? That means
mhm.
cut them, right? Most of your drive through people aren't going to say that, right? They're going to say, don't put tomatoes or onions, or cut
Right.
the tomatoes or onions, or they're going to use some variation or words of that. Well, if AI doesn't know what the words are that the person is using, it may not know what it means.
Oh,
Can you put
wow.
mustard on that? Can you add mustard to that? Like, there's so
Mhm.
many different ways and dialects and other things in our slang language, right? That we have so many different ways that people can say the same thing. But if AI doesn't learn that, then it doesn't know what to do. And it messed up more orders and caused more chaos and so many issues that the person at the window was like, all I'm dealing with are angry customers and
Right,
frustration because the
right.
others are wrong.
They were
So
hoping
the
for an enhanced customer experience, and what they got was a diminished customer experience.
exactly.
Mhm,
So the CEO says, Mandy, what do I do with this? Like, how do I fix this? We spent a ton of money on this. And I said, well, what we're going to do is they've already turned it off. So let's turn it on for 30 days, but still keep the person taking the order. Let's just have AI record and capture the information for 30 days of orders coming through. And then when we were during that time, those 30 days, we were actually talking to the employees, we were having conversations, we were informing them of the why that we were doing this and the outcome that we were looking for, so that they got the change management, they got the why
yeah,
that we were doing it. We wanted
mhm,
you as an employee to have a better experience. We want you to talk to the people at the window. We don't want you to have people yelling at you because something's wrong or whatever. And we want it to go fast, right? Fast and speedy makes your shift go by quickly. It increases revenue. There's so many positive things, but from an employee perspective, it's such a better positive experience because they're not just standing there, right?
mhm, mhm.
So we were able to shift that. 45 days later, we relaunched everything. They were able to see reduce speed by about a half a second or more. in the
Mm-hmm.
drive-through,
Mm-hmm.
improved guest satisfaction by almost 20%,
That's
and it
huge.
improved employee satisfaction by 15%.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
so truly revenue growth, financial efficiencies that they receive through those P's. They did have reduced headcount, but to be honest, the person they ended up putting at the window made more money because they really wanted somebody who was really skilled in the customer experience side.
Mm-hmm.
So there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a huge labor component savings, but that's not really what they were driving. They were really trying to drive the revenue, the guest satisfaction, and those pieces. So they finally got the outcome they needed, but they just needed to step back in that and say, how do I train the AI to do the things I need it to do?
There's a couple of things coming out of this story, Mandy, that are sort of resonating with me. The first one, which is sort of at the tip of this particular spear, is sometimes the best laid transformation initiatives can go wrong in really what I would consider to be simplistic ways. And in this case, it was an oversight. It was probably a misunderstanding of what was required to make the technology successful.
Sure.
And as a result of it, they implemented and ended up, further away from their target rather than closer to their target. So that's one element. The second thing that I heard you talk about, which I think from a transformation standpoint is absolutely important, which is stratifying your audiences, understanding who your customer is, understanding that the employee base is an audience, maybe understanding that managers or line supervisors are an audience, and then doing exactly what you said this organization didn't do, which is involve them, inform them, educate them, and where possible, get their buy-in to
Yes.
the transformation. And that was also missing in that first initiative. And then it was exactly what you brought into the second initiative to to repair and then relaunch this transformation.
Exactly. One of the fun things that we did with this team, I just thought that this was a funny story. One of the ways that we brought the team in or brought them along with us is we let them add some of the words to AI. Like, what do you hear your guests or
Hmm.
customers saying in the drive through? And we made them have fun with it, right? Like, use funny voices or funny sounds, like, right?
Yeah.
Just record the information coming forward. Or, hey, why don't you drive your car through here, right? We'll pay you extra, we'll get you a free meal or whatever, right? But go through the drive through. So we got them involved in kind of that experience of, but have fun with it, right? What are some of the things that are out of the norm that people may say in the scope of ordering? This is what they do every day. They talk to these customers and guests every single day. They're going to know. So use that information to help drive it. Plus, it got buy-in, and then we were able to do kudos with them and say, Bill Smith was able to, add 15 new words
Yes.
the AI,
Yes.
database that we didn't have before. And kudos to him for doing that. And, just things like that, that most people don't think about as they think about AI.
Hmm. And then, how it all wrapped up, Mandy, the idea of, actually getting to that desired state, an improved customer experience, measurably improved, improved employee engagement as a result of the transformation. Really, what a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. It was an interesting time to go through it, for sure. But I'm glad on the other end we were able to get some fantastic results. But you're right. In the beginning, it's so easy to let something so simple can go wrong, right? By the
Hmm.
by the simplest of steps in that process.
Hmm. Yeah. In fact, one of my favorite recommendations is where possible, test first. Right.
Yes.
Implement and test on a small scale. Let's call it a pilot because that's what we call them. But, if you can test for it first before rolling it out at scale, and then work it out so that, the transformation experience is actually set up for success. Yeah. When possible, that's the right thing to do.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree
Can
for
I just
sure. And
ask,
they, yeah.
I was just going to say, can I just ask, from that experience, what were your big takeaways? What did you learn from that?
Yeah, I learned about really bringing all the people together in a very
Yeah.
collective group. Let's make sure that the CEO's thoughts and ideas are being heard. Let's make sure finance is hearing and understanding where her thoughts are. Let's make sure that the operators are involved in that and have a very cross-functional team to really drive that. Because I think if they'd have had some of that, they would have seen that. I think the CEO was talking to finance for sure. The CEO was talking to her ops team and various others, but I'm not sure it was very cross-functional in that everybody understood the end result that they were trying to accomplish
Hmm.
and get to. I think
Hmm.
finance took that big step and was like, yep, we're going to get our savings and our efficiencies right away, right? And I think ops was like, okay, we're going to implement this and we're going to go too, right? But I don't know that they
Mm.
really talked together from a cross-functional perspective. And I also, I realize that AI is still really, it's AI has been around for years and years and years. You and I know that from a
Yeah.
technology perspective. And as you know, I come from a tech background as well as HR, but people really don't understand that technology is only as good as what you tell it to do or what you
Mm.
ask it to do. Like when I
Hmm.
do control C, I'm going to get a copy, right? Or if I
Right.
click the copy, I'm going to get a copy, but I still have to paste, right? And if I don't tell it
Hmm.
to paste, you didn't do so much. Right. And
Right.
so, same thing with AI that people just assume it's always going to do everything you expect it to do, and it's only as good as what it's been trained or told to do from a programming perspective or what it can learn through experience during that time.
Yeah. When I want to go back to something we were talking about a second ago, which is um, what it sounded like was discombobulation in the change initiative, that certain departments and divisions were essentially on different scripts and different playbooks. And for me, when I think about transformation, I always think about something that comes from a book called The Work of Leaders, Vision, Alignment, and Execution, right? Getting a lot of clarity around vision, making sure that everyone is on the same vision page. What are the expectations? What are the outcomes? What are the goals? And then the alignment component, which I think was missing in this case in
Yes.
your story, right? Getting everybody on that same page, understanding what their, maybe their individual or their departmental or, divisional resistance might be in solving for that, but also just making sure that everyone is aligned on the same vision. And then ultimately that allows execution to go forward in as, a flawless free kind of, or a flawless, friction free kind of environment. And
Agreed.
I think that was probably the missing element in, or at least one of the major ones in your story.
Yeah, definitely. I do think they jumped to solve very quickly.
Right. Moving to
And
solutioning too fast.
for sure. And they had the right intent, right? The right heart, the right intent. They were all trying to accomplish the goal and the vision. They just weren't all aligned in that so and so needed to go first before we could do X, Y, and Z. And there are steps and progression that need to happen within the projects to ensure that alignment happens and that your goals and your outcomes can really be realized.
Love it. Love it. Well, let's talk about one of your other topics here, which is how to leverage existing talent. What's the concept or the theory behind this?
Yeah, really skills. So if we
Okay.
think about jobs today, we think about the workforce, right? The workforce is shrinking, and we have less people in the workforce today than we've ever had before. We have job descriptions that are based by humans, right? They're made by a human person sitting there, usually with some kind of task or responsibility, not necessarily a skill, but a responsibility, right? That somebody needs to do, and we place people into those jobs without really fully understanding the skill set of that individual.
Hmm.
And so that ties to motivation, that ties to their career progression, it ties to their satisfaction, but it also ties to the growth and strategy movement of an organization.
Hmm.
And so I'm going to talk about a specific organization that I worked with. It was a smaller organization. It was another restaurant company, but they were trying to grow and be more. So they had, 40-ish locations, about 250 million in revenue, give or take. So doing well. But they knew that if they wanted to expand, it wasn't always going to be about what's the next restaurant we open. So we
Mhm.
were looking at, from a C-suite perspective, we were sitting talking about revenue streams and what are additional revenue streams that we want to bring into play over the next 1, 3, 5 years down the
Mhm.
path. And one of those was consumer product goods. So could we
Mhm.
take some of the products that we make? Could we sell them in a Whole Foods? Could we sell them in Trader Joe's or some grocery store or on a shelf at Walmart? What about catering? Catering is another
Mm.
option that has a huge sales component. And if you have the right product, how do you drive that? Especially now that more people are going back to offices, they're having meetings again, the
Mhm.
return to office is a big deal again. And then the third one was starting a new concept, right? All of those need skills and talent and people to launch them, to drive them, to conceptualize them, and to be able to execute on those pieces. So there's really three components that go with that, which is build, buy, or borrow, right? From a talent perspective, you either have to build it inside, you've got to buy it, or you've got to borrow it. In this space, I'm actually saying, does it already exist? And
Mhm.
so if you look at people, if you look at a current human capital management system today, it captures a person, it captures their profile, it captures their what
Mm.
was the skills that they had before they came to work there? What skills did they may have grown through the process of working for you, and are you
Mhm.
tackling that? So my first conversation was, who has consumer product good skills? Who
Right.
has catering skills within our organization? So we took some tools, couple of different tools, and I'll talk about some specific ones in a little bit. But we took some skills and we put our job descriptions into those, and we said, okay, what are the skills that are coming out of these jobs? So who might fall into some of the skills that we might need with this? And then we said, what about people's resumes? What if we pulled the resumes from the applications that they have, that they applied for these jobs, and we put those into the system, and we see, who do we have that already may have worked in a consumer product good space, who worked for
Mhm.
General Mills, who worked for some of
Right.
these places. And what if we had some conversations around, what do you feel about doing a new project? How would you feel about being a mentor? How would you feel about helping us solve and conceptualize putting a new consumer product good in place? And
Mhm.
where is your skill set in understanding those pieces? So that was just kind of one example, but we were able to really use this technology to put all of our data into, to then spit out what might we have. Now, of course, we still had to evaluate whether or not we felt that their skills were at the level that we needed from either a
Right.
conceptual or an
Right.
execution. But at least we weren't having to go, let's get a job out there, let's go hire somebody, spend money. We ended up saving about $500,000 prior to
Wow.
launch, just
Wow.
because of the use of existing talent and skills. We ended up finding about 15 people out of, we had about 4 or 5 thousand people total. So out of
Mhm.
that, we were able to use this conglomerate, and we created a committee. Some individuals worked on different things, some worked on others, but wow, the satisfaction that they got out of that, and their commitment to launching something strategic and launching something new and being a part of that, from somebody at the corporate office all the way down to an hourly employee who had worked in a grocery store and could tell us what it would look like from a packaging and putting it on the shelf to,
Mhm.
just so many different levels that we don't think about. But it had to start at the strategy side. And that's
Mhm.
where I think there's this missing component, is that we jump to, okay, we're going to build the strategy, we're going to do all this stuff, and then we're going to buy, or we're going to hire consultants, or we're going to spend a ton of money to do all these things. And then we're already at a deficit before we even launch.
Yeah.
And we get any revenue coming from that. And in this place, we were able to, without having to do consultants, without having to hire talent, we were able to use our existing workforce to really drive that by looking at skills and not
Yeah.
just the current job that somebody's in, and really evaluating what people really bring to the table across the board,
Mhm.
not just
Mhm.
how we need them today.
There are multiple things about this story that are really resonating with me. Um, one one is you're starting from a higher place when you look at existing talent because they already have the institutional knowledge for one. They
Yes.
understand the culture of the organization. So that's not something that has to be worked out with new talent. They probably already have connections and open communication channels to improve decision making and resourcing and troubleshooting problems all along the way. And then to the points that you brought up, you saved a $500,000 in dollars, but you
Dollars.
also saved transition time. And I'm not sure how you would capture opportunity cost here, but I'm sure that was significant as well by the ability to utilize existing talent. That's really, really brilliant.
Yeah, we were able to launch 6 months earlier than we'd originally planned. Now,
How about
granted,
that?
there were some things that we adjusted because of the voices that came, right? The task force that we put together, they came up with some things that we were like, "Oh, didn't think about that. Let's try and let's innovate on that and see what happens." So we had it probably would have been truly if it was from exactly what the strategy was to that, it would probably would have been a year sooner than we normally would have launched. But we said 6 months because we let them innovate and we let them bring things to the table that we hadn't really thought of in that space. So agree with you that that institutional knowledge that they already have with the culture, with the decision making, with the connections of people, those
Yeah,
types of things really did make a huge difference. And like I said, saved $500,000 prior to the launch before we even got out the door to driving revenue. So it really put us in a very good spot
already
to,
winning.
yeah, already winning.
I
Exactly.
love that. I love that. That's what a great story. And I'm just curious, where did the modeling come from for this exploration? Was that something that you brought to the conversation?
I did. It's something I have done in my past, and I've really been very intentional lately about thinking about talent and that
Hmm.
our workforce continues to shrink. People are coming to us skilled in many ways, but we're only looking at them about a fraction of what they really bring to the table. Let's say I've got a marketing person, they're a marketing director, they do branding, but in their past life, they did website design. Okay, great. I may not be using in that in the scope of today, but what if we
What
have
if?
something else? What if? Exactly. So
My favorite
I'm
question.
yeah, exactly. So it was really about and being a data person and a technology minded person, I'm like, how can I get to the heart of who do we have, right? I have too
Hmm.
many people with 5,000 employees, right, to do this manually, right? I can't just go to each person and interview them. That's too much. How can I take at least what is the information we already have from performance reviews, from their current profile, from their
Right.
current job descriptions, and from skills that we knew we would need in this project as well as their resumes and applications, use all that information to compile it to then tell me what do I have and what do I not have.
This just seems like such a smart approach and maybe even a smarter approach when it comes to, thinking of the inventory of your talent. Not that it's inventory, but inventorying skills that can be used
Sure.
and brought forward. And I think, one of the things that was going through my mind as you were talking is, yeah, the workforce is shrinking, and as boomers start to age out, it's going to shrink even more and probably at a more rapid rate. And then when I think about this strategy around, again, just strategic succession planning,
Hmm.
where can we build those growth pathways for the existing talent and their existing and maybe future skill sets? It seems very, very comprehensive to me, Mandy.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of conversations happening now around AI and technology and how can we use that to identify what skills and talent we have. But
Hmm.
most of the technologies that you see out there, human capital management, those things are their HRS systems. They're really capturing only the surface level
Yeah,
information. And
yeah.
so we've really got to get deeper. We've really got to get deeper, especially if we're thinking about AI and how it's going to make changes in the workplace.
I'm smiling as you're making the statement that we've got to get deeper. One of the elements of our work is around psychological profiling. And it tells us so much about an individual, and it tells us so much about teams. We can predict behaviors, we can predict decision making skills and competencies and focuses. We understand communication styles and preferences. We understand how people and organizations show up when they're in conflict. I would love to see talent management systems start incorporating those insights. This is just in parallel with what you're describing, which is
Agreed.
understanding skills and competencies on a much deeper level. And when we start overlying that, that psychological intel, I think again, when we think about succession planning or growth and development or hypo programs, those all of those programs are going to be benefited by better insights here.
Yeah, I agree. I do think what you were talking about in that psychological analysis and more assessments and those things will really help us to validate the skills that people are bringing and how well
Mhm,
they're going to progress in their succession and what
mhm,
is their potential, right? I think we talk a lot about that right now. It's still very subjective, right, to a human
mhm.
element to that. But I think some of these tools and technologies, if we can get them to talk together through AI, through other ways, and capture more of that information about people, I think we will get to um, a much more fully use of the talent that we have.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's right. And who benefits from that? Everybody. The
Everybody.
organization benefits from it, the employee benefits from it, customers benefited, and ultimately shareholders benefit from it.
Exactly, exactly. There's
Yeah.
huge impact that can happen by doing things this way. I can tell you that the employees that were part of this task force, they were so happy to be a part of something. Our shareholders and our board was just over the moon, right, with the results and
Mhm.
direction that they saw in moving this forward and how we were able to save, but just were really thoughtful. We were very strategic in our approach and how we, set things up, how we used our people inside, and we're able to really drive that to success. So it's
Mhm.
just it's really one of the key things I think that we need to really change if we think about talent is that we've got to focus on skills and what people bring.
And I think ultimately back to the head of this segment, doing that inventory of skill sets and then having it available, having that data available so that it can be used in decision making as we, think about deploying talent, as we think about promotability in organizations, as we think about, in the example you gave previously, thinking about strategic pivots and then how do we leverage that, that let's call it talent intel that we have, or
Mhm.
in most cases today that we don't have, but should have.
Yes, totally agree. Totally
Yeah.
agree.
Well, this is an interesting place then to pivot since you've mentioned AI now a few times. AI is in the process of, or has the potential to, and in some cases already has displaced talent. Tell me what you're thinking about in that category.
Yeah, a few things come to mind. I feel a lot of people who are remaining in the workforce who have not been displaced are on edge. I think
Mm,
they're worried that they're next, right? What else is
mhm,
AI going to do? What's next in this space? Um, again, I go back to the workplace shrinkage, right? Not through just the generational component of that, which has huge, tremendous amounts of institutional knowledge that we're going to lose, right, with the
right.
boomers, but people being laid off because of AI and things of that nature. I think really what this makes me think is that our CEOs, our CHROs, are they really thinking about AI and the outcomes they're really looking for? Are they really thinking about them in the right way? Yeah, so I have a lot of conversations with CEOs today who are so excited that they have an AI budget. And I'm like, that's
Mhm,
really great, but what are you going to do with it? And so
mhm,
they're still kind of pondering what they're going to do. And usually the first thing I hear is, I'm going to cut headcount. And I'm like, okay, for what purpose? Right? What do you hope to gain from that? What's the outcome that you are driving? Well, I'm going to save money.
mhm,
Well, yes, but maybe not. because one of the things that I really want people to think about and what I share with these CEOs is you might reduce your headcount. But what AI is replacing is that menial manual work, that lower level component, that entry level piece. And so now the talent that you are going to need to move forward with the remainder of the work or the additional expectations you have is going to be at a higher compensation cost than the people you had before.
Mm.
So while your headcount may reduce, your total compensation dollars may not.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes,
Yeah, that's interesting.
many of them are like, "Oh, I never thought about it that way." And I'm like,
Hmm.
"Well, that is certainly part of that." I will also say I'm going to go back to the governance piece a lot because I'm on a few different committees talking about AI governance,
Okay.
where it's more around should you do something versus
Hmm.
could you, right? Because AI can
Hmm.
do a lot, right? We can build AI to do so many things, but should AI be hiring people and making those decisions?
Right.
Should AI be talking to your guests in that way? Who is managing the experience and driving those things? So again, I go back to what outcome are you really looking for? What impact are you looking for within your organization? Not that I'm going to cut headcount. That's a result, right? That's a result
Hmm.
of something that you may do. What's the outcome or the impact that you're driving in your business, which will then allow us to back into the governance and the pieces of what should or could we do with the AI components that we're driving. And
Hmm.
that really goes down to the people that are displaced, right? We really have to now think differently about how we're incentivizing the people who remain with us.
Hmm.
And so we have to think more about, like, as an example, can we give them special projects? Can we incentivize them in ways that build their excitement and make them a part of something, right? Money is always going to be a factor, right? The bonuses, the numbers, everybody's going to think of that. So I'm not coming to the table with the dollars. I'm not going to
Hmm.
share that because everybody knows that at some point people are going to want some money. But what I
Hmm.
would say is that we have to think differently about how we're going to incentivize people and how are we going to manage our workforce for those who remain with us in a different way? And so I want to call out an article I read just recently from the Wall Street Journal. And it was that AI is, while it's removing two things that you need to consider. So when AI replaces a job, because it's manual, it's menial, it's data entry, whatever, you are removing the tasks that a person may be doing without thought where they might be being innovative and coming up with ideas. So if a person's brain is constantly focused on high level task, high level task, high level task, high level task, there's no time for innovation. So when I think about, oh, I'm having to do this data entry really quick, but through my head as a skilled person, a skilled worker, oh, I'm thinking about, oh, I wonder if we tried XYZ. I'm brainstorming with myself, right? We're not
Hmm.
thinking about the lack of innovation that we may have from people because of that. The other piece that I would tell you is a concern with AI coming in and replacing jobs is burnout's going to be faster.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So again, people are going to be working at the highest level, right? We're talking about less headcount. So we're using people to their fullest extent. People are going to expect 80 to 90, 100% of that person. And
Yep.
somebody working at full capacity, no water cooler talks, not many lunch breaks, not the chit chat that happens in the office, right? Full force. Your brain can only sustain that and your body can only sustain that level to a certain percentage in a certain period of time before they need a break or
Hmm.
before they burn out. So what Wall Street Journal was saying is that the speed to burnout is going to be much faster, and it's going to be something that we as HR leaders and as CEOs need to be careful in thinking about our people, is that while AI can do that, should it?
Huh. Gosh, what an interesting concept.
For sure.
Is
There's
there in your mind, is there a remedy, or is there guidance here that you would be recommending? What are you thinking about here?
Yeah, great. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot. My thoughts are really around, okay, what's the percentage of a person's job that AI is going to take away? If it's
Okay.
5 or 10%, probably not worth the effort.
No
And it's
risk
still
exposure.
no risk exposure. If it's 50 to 80%, different story, right? Then
Okay.
we can talk about. So we really need to look at what is the job? What are the skills needed in that job? What are the tasks needed to require? What's the percentage that AI can impact that, but still leave capacity for that person to learn, to grow, to communicate, to have some fun, right? Within the span of their workforce and their day, so that they will continue to be engaged workers and be innovative and driving that. So for me, what I'm doing now is really taking a lot of the information I've been collecting about skills and the jobs and that information and trying to identify and work with companies to say, okay, yes, you could remove all that,
Hmm.
but should you?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
really looking at those percentages of work.
Is the cost benefit actually there? Yeah.
Exactly.
Or is it an illusion because we're
Yes,
romanced by technology right now? Huh.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
really interesting, Mandy. That's phenomenal. Huh.
Yeah, I do think people are not really thinking about the reduction of innovation and how people
Hmm.
brainstorm and think about things when they're doing some menial kind of task, right? And I really don't think they're thinking about that. I think most people are thinking that AI or technology is going to reduce burnout. And in fact, it's not the way that it's going today. And
Hmm.
so that those definitely have to be key factors that are continued to look at, as well as the incentivization for employees now who are left in the workforce. How are we going to
Hmm.
incentivize them to bring those skills forward to do this work with AI, as well as given we've already displaced people, right? So we need to continue to engage with them, and really that component is a really critical piece.
Yeah, I love that. Gosh, what really, really interesting insights and really interesting thought spaces here today. I appreciate you joining us and sharing your perspectives on these topics. That's phenomenal.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed the conversation and
Me
and
too.
speaking with you. Yeah.
Me too. And I've got a couple of other questions for you before we transition out. I ask everybody these, so again, feel free to have some fun with them if you can. But one of my favorite questions. It's one of my favorite questions, just because the answers can be really interesting. What was the best piece of advice you were given and didn't take?
Stability. So I would say the best piece of advice I was given was to stay at a particular company for a long period of time.
Okay.
And I'm a risk taker when it comes to my career. And so
Hmm.
there are certainly times when I have looked back and said, "Oh, should I have made that change or that direction? Done those pieces, that things." I do think that there is there's less drama, there's less chaos when you are stable. In most cases, and you stay at the same job, you stay at the same company,
Yeah.
you kind of ride the wave with that.
Yep.
But then I would say I wouldn't have had two businesses. I wouldn't have had some of the
Right.
experiences that I had. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have gained some of those things. So I think there's pros and cons to that best piece of advice. I look at that a lot and go, okay, where would I have been if I'd have stayed where I was when I first
Yeah.
started?
This is one of those fun ones for me. My brain is doing all kinds of nerding out right now on your
Of course.
answer. Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is people are built differently, again, because we do work in the psychological assessment space. There are people who are absolutely built for those stability kinds of roles. These are people who are going to exploit processes and procedures for incremental levels of improvement. And the trade-off for them is, there's the perception that it's a safer space to be in.
Mhm.
It's probably a little more comfortable. It's probably a much lower risk profile, to your point. And it is absolutely right for them to adopt that kind of positioning. And I'm guessing the person who gave you the advice was probably one of those kinds of people, and it was, that was their own bias. What they didn't understand was that advice wasn't appropriate for you.
Yeah,
It was
yeah, for
never gonna
sure.
it was never gonna work for you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think she knows that now. She gave that to me, gosh, 30, oh no, 29 years ago.
Yeah,
And she's still a mentor and a friend and somebody I still
yeah.
connect with. She's still at the same company 30 something years now.
How about
Um,
that?
and
How about that?
we have some great conversations about the differences in our careers
Yeah.
and the whys of what we both learned through those times. So she wasn't wrong for her, but you're absolutely right. She definitely was wrong for me and the direction of my career.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I think that's one of the beauties of psychological profiling is you can then, we talked earlier in your drive-through experience about stratifying audiences.
Mm,
When we do psychological assessments, it allows us to stratify. Just an example of this is if we're trying to do something that is much more innovative related. Well, innovation requires trial and error, and it requires testing and innovation, and you have to have a relatively lower risk profile and mindset, or maybe a higher threshold for risk to really succeed in innovation. Well, if you don't have those profiles and that's the job we give you, we're probably setting you up for failure and the outcomes to not fail or to fail as well. And
agree,
so it's really about finding the right talent for the right reasons for the right roles. And I
agree.
think that's a tough thing to do, but when we get it right, it's phenomenal. Well,
Yeah,
that's really interesting. Sometimes I hear people say, gosh, I was given great advice, I didn't take it, and then I should have,
yeah.
because they were right. This isn't one of those cases. You were given advice
Not
that
one of those
you
cases.
didn't take, and you shouldn't have taken it, and I'm glad you didn't.
Thank you. Thank you. I've
Yeah,
I've thought twice, two or three times over the course of my career about that advice, but for
yeah,
sure I
nice,
think it's worked out well.
nice. Now, you own and run a business now, that focuses on talent, but it's obviously sort of embedded in the world of HR. What advice would you give somebody who is either new or upcoming or considering either a career in HR or entrepreneurialism?
Yeah, either of those two things come to mind, and then I'll talk specifically about HR. But one is be curious.
Yeah, I love that.
Always ask why, always ask the questions, and always be learning.
Yeah,
I,
always be
I will
learning.
tell you, people used to say to me all the time, you ask so many questions. And I said, well, I'm not sure how else I'm supposed to learn if I don't ask the questions, right? And we assume so many things. So being curious and always learning are two things that I would give advice to any young person coming into, their career in any space. From an
Yeah.
HR, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we talked about earlier, what if is one of my favorite questions. Why is my favorite question? By
Yes.
far and away, why is my favorite question? And I always love, getting a response to the question because it's always rich and it's always fruitful. And so to your point about being curious and being driven by the why question and going out and getting it answered and then asking it again, right? And getting it
Mhm.
answered is probably one of the most important pieces of advice I would give to every young person or new person coming into a field.
Agree, agree.
Yeah, I
From
love
the
that.
A from the A I love that. From the HR side of things, I would say I think HR is in its own transformation today. And that organizations are really beginning to see the value of HR overall outside of a compliance area.
Right.
And so I have seen multiple leaders who are now chief people officer and AI officer or digital transformation officer or things of that nature. And so I'm beginning to see some of the technology and or the governance around AI and change really coming into the HR space. And so what I would tell an individual coming into HR is to learn all you can about all the different aspects of HR and
Hmm.
find your niche, because there are so many different aspects of HR. It could be employee relations, it could be benefits, it could be payroll, it could be learning or recruiting or so many different things. things, but HR is in this space of transformation. And so there's going to be new things coming to the forefront that are going to drive that.
Really good. Same question. What piece of advice or wisdom would you give to a peer? Something that's foundational for you that ensures your continued success. What would you share with others, in your peer group?
Yeah, I think embrace technology.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from a technology background,
Yeah.
and then came into HR. Many of your HR leaders are not, but HR is here to stay. Sorry, technology is here to stay in
It's
some
not
form
going
or
away.
fashion. It's not
Hmm.
going away. So let it be your friend, right? Let it be
Hmm.
your data agnostic piece. Find ways to use the data and the information that you have to help you in your job and be successful. Use the information to connect to the business, not the fluffy HR stuff, but the actual business results, whether it's guest satisfaction. You heard less about me talking about turnover and some of those things, and more about driving revenue and about guest satisfaction and improving labor and things of that nature than I was about turnover or engagement scores or whatever. So
Hmm.
I really believe that our HR leaders need to be business leaders with the HR
Mm.
hat, and using technology as an enabler.
I couldn't endorse that piece of advice more. I see a lot of HR leaders and HR professionals who are really good at being HR people. And the advice that I always give them is, if my focus is always about creating or adding value, regardless of your discipline or your field. In HR, if you want to find those opportunities for creating or delivering more value, you must understand the business. You need to understand the business that you're in. You need to understand competitors. You need to understand the client experience and where revenue comes from. And then you can, and more, of course, product and innovation. And then you can serve your organization in a much more strategic manner and fashion.
Yeah, agree
Yeah,
totally.
I love
And
that.
I think so many miss that, but I think it's going to be in high demand as we continue to move forward.
I would say it's becoming less and less negotiable, is what it looks like to me.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
I'd like to share my one key tag phrase for AI, if you're okay with that.
Yes, please.
Um, so my tag phrase for AI is that AI elevates human possibilities.
Love that. Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
people going into AI projects can really think about that, how is it going to elevate human possibilities? Then you can really think about your outcomes, as you move forward.
Excellent. Well, Mandy, I have to say it was a real pleasure to speak with you today. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and I'm
Same.
honored that you wanted to join us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited. Thank you.
You're welcome. If people wanted to get in touch with you, what would be a good way for them to do that?
Probably LinkedIn would be the best.
Okay. You're responding to messages there
I
and
am.
connection requests. Okay. So if someone wanted to continue the conversation with you, get in touch on LinkedIn and then go from there.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mandy, thanks so much. Wishing you the
Thank
best
you.
in 2026, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. You as well.
Okay, take care.
Bye bye.
The Transformational Leadership Podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes vision, action, diagnostics, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to let us know in the comments. We'd love you to join the conversation and help us transform the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are transforming organizations, leaders, and teams. In the meantime, be sure to like, subscribe, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.